It was the last Christmas I spent in my own home, feeling like a ghost, not a spectral presence, but a living, breathing woman, rendered invisible by the very people who should have cherished me most. The words, when they came, weren't shouted. They were delivered with a casual dismissiveness that cut deeper than any scream. "We'll be spending Christmas at my mom's house this year, Martha. You can stay home." My daughter-in-law, Clara, didn't even look up from her plate as she spoke. Her perfectly manicured hand, adorned with a diamond I'd helped Daniel buy, gestured vaguely in my direction, as if I were a piece of furniture she was deciding to move. My son Daniel sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the intricate pattern of the tablecloth, a tablecloth I had painstakingly embroidered for him when he was just a boy. He didn't meet my eyes. He didn't speak. He just sat there, a silent accomplice to my erasure. The silence in the dining room, usually filled with the comforting sounds of family, grew thick and suffocating. It was December 15th, 10 days until Christmas, and in that moment, my home, the house I had built with my late husband Arthur, the house that held every memory of our life together, felt like a cold, empty shell. I was 68 years old, not 90. I still worked part-time as a librarian, walked 3 miles every morning, and volunteered at the local animal shelter. But to Clara, I was just Martha, an inconvenience, an old woman past her prime, easily dismissed. A tremor ran through me, a familiar tightening in my chest, but this time, something was different. This time, the familiar sting of humiliation didn't lead to tears. Instead, a quiet, furious resolve began to simmer beneath the surface. I rose from the table, my hands steady despite the tremor in my heart. "Enjoy your meal," I said, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. Then I walked away, leaving them to their quiet, calculated cruelty. Upstairs, in my bedroom, the Christmas lights from the neighbors' houses twinkled, like distant, uncaring stars. For 3 years, since Daniel and Clara had moved in after Daniel's photography studio failed, I had endured their slow, steady dismantling of my life. First, it was the small slights, the casual disregard. Then, it escalated. My antique writing desk, a gift from my grandmother, sold on a whim for a pittance. My beloved rose garden, Clara's modernization project, replaced with stark, geometric pavers. Each incident a tiny chip at my dignity, each one met with Daniel's averted gaze, his mumbled excuses. But tonight, something inside me snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply opened my laptop, my fingers moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. Flights, hotels, a destination, somewhere far away, somewhere I could be Martha again, not just Martha. By 11 p.m., a plane ticket to Savannah, Georgia was confirmed. $900. A small fortune, but a price I was willing to pay for my freedom. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't ask for permission. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I made a decision just for me. Little did I know, as I clicked confirm, that this decision wouldn't just change my Christmas. It would unravel the carefully constructed web of their betrayal and expose a truth I was not prepared for. 3 years. 3 years since Daniel, my only son, had arrived on my doorstep with Clara, 2 suitcases, and a defeated look that tore at my heart. "Mom, the studio, it's gone." The pandemic had been brutal. His fledgling photography business had collapsed, leaving them with mounting debts and no apartment. "It's just temporary," Clara had declared, sweeping into my home with her designer luggage and an air of entitlement that grated from day one. 6 months, tops, while we get back on our feet. What could I do? He was my son, my home, a spacious Victorian I'd inherited and lovingly restored, became their refuge. The first few months were a tense truce. Clara complained about everything, the water pressure, the internet speed, the dated decor, but she mostly kept to their designated guest suite. Daniel worked tirelessly from the dining room, trying to rebuild his business. I cooked, cleaned, and tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Then, the changes began. One morning, Clara appeared with a home decor magazine, her eyes glinting with a dangerous enthusiasm. "Martha, can we talk about this old monstrosity?" She pointed to the antique grandfather clock in the hall, a cherished family heirloom that had chimed the hours in my family for generations. "It just doesn't fit the modern aesthetic. What if we moved it? Or replaced it?" A cold knot formed in my stomach. That clock belonged to my great-grandmother, Clara. It's staying. I tried to keep my voice firm, but a tremor betrayed me. She just laughed, a light, dismissive sound. Oh, Martha, always clinging to the past. Sometimes you have to let go to make room for the new, don't you think? Daniel was in the kitchen, pouring coffee. He heard every word. I looked at him, pleading for support. He just shrugged, avoiding my gaze. Mom, it's just a clock. Just a clock. Those 3 words echoed in my mind for weeks. 3 weeks later, I returned from my volunteer shift to find the hall empty. The clock was gone. In its place, a sleek, minimalist console table. Where is it? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Clara, engrossed in her phone, barely glanced up. Oh, that old thing? I sold it on Facebook Marketplace. Got a decent price for it. Used the money for some new kitchen gadgets. You're welcome, by the way. A decent price. A piece of my history, a tangible link to my ancestors, sold for a few $100s. I fled to my room, the tears finally coming, hot and bitter. That was the first major blow, the first time I truly understood what was happening. They weren't just living in my house, they were slowly, systematically, erasing my presence from it. Over the next 3 years, the pattern continued. My grandmother's embroidered curtains, replaced with Clara's chic blinds, my collection of antique books, relegated to dusty boxes in the attic, my credit card, borrowed for emergencies, that always seemed to involve designer clothes or expensive dinners for Clara and her friends. Each time I confronted Daniel, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. Each time he would offer some weak excuse, some plea for understanding, some promise that things would change. But they never did. He was a shadow of the son I knew, manipulated and controlled by Clara, seemingly incapable of standing up to her, or for me. My life became a quiet battle for every inch of my own home, a battle I was steadily losing. I retreated into myself, spending more time in my room, finding solace in books, and the occasional phone call with my dear friend Eleanor, who lived across the country. I felt like a prisoner in my own house, a silent observer of my own life being dismantled. The vibrant, independent woman I once was, the woman who had built a successful career and raised a son after her husband's untimely death, was slowly fading, replaced by a timid, resentful shadow. But the Christmas invitation, or lack thereof, was the final straw. You can stay home. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about my entire existence. It was about my worth, my place in my own family, my right to simply be. And in that moment, something shifted. The quiet despair that had clung to me for so long began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard anger. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of being dismissed. I was tired of being a victim. My flight to Savannah was on December 23rd. I packed a small suitcase, a few books, and a journal. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone for Christmas. Will be back after the new year. No explanation. No apology. No details. Just a simple statement of fact. I wanted to see their faces when they read it, to imagine the confusion, the indignation. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt monumental. Savannah was everything I needed. The historic squares, draped in Spanish moss, felt ancient and wise. The air was warm, a welcome contrast to the biting December chill of home. I walked for hours, exploring the cobblestone streets, admiring the antebellum architecture, and simply breathing. I ate delicious southern food, visited art galleries, and spent an entire afternoon reading in Forsyth Park, the sunlight dappling through the live oaks. On Christmas Eve, I found myself in a small, cozy cafe, sipping a latte, and watching the world go by. The aroma of freshly ground coffee mingled with the faint sweetness of pastries, creating a comforting embrace. Outside, a gentle rain had begun to fall, washing the cobblestones to a gleaming obsidian. A man at the next table, reading a newspaper, looked up and smiled. He had kind eyes, crinkling at the corners, and a gentle, unassuming air. "Lovely day for it, isn't it?" he said, his voice a warm southern drawl. "Perfect for getting lost in a good book, or a good city." His name was David. He was a retired history professor, visiting Savannah for the holidays, just like me. We talked for hours, about books, about travel, about life. There was an ease to our conversation, a natural rhythm that I hadn't experienced in years. He listened intently, his gaze steady and warm, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. We ended up having Christmas dinner together at a charming little bistro, sharing stories and laughter. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows on the brick walls, and the clinking of silverware and hushed conversations of other diners created a symphony of contentment. It was a simple, beautiful evening, filled with genuine connection. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up feeling light and free. The sun streamed through the hotel room window, painting the carpet in stripes of gold. David and I met for breakfast, and then, on a whim, decided to take a carriage tour of the historic district. As we rode through the sun-drenched streets, the clip-clop of the horses' hooves a soothing rhythm, I felt a profound sense of peace. The scent of magnolias, even in winter, hung faintly in the air, a sweet promise. David, sensing my contentment, pulled out his phone. "Mind if I take a picture? This moment feels special." I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile, and we posed for a selfie, the ancient oaks and elegant mansions forming a beautiful backdrop. Later that day, I posted the photo on my private social media page, a page I rarely used. "Christmas in Savannah," I wrote, "making new memories." I didn't think anything of it. It was a simple snapshot of a happy moment, a small act of sharing with the few friends who followed me. What happened next was a whirlwind. My phone started ringing, vibrating incessantly. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. It was Daniel. His voice, when I finally answered, was a mixture of anger and confusion. "Mom, what is this? Who is that man? Where are you? Why didn't you tell us you were going away?" I took a deep breath, the calm resolve I'd found in Savannah holding firm. "I'm in Savannah, Daniel, and that's a friend I made here. I left a note. I'm an adult. I don't need your permission to travel." But Christmas. We were worried. Clara's furious. She said you did this to spite us, to make us look bad." His voice was rising, laced with the familiar manipulation. "Spite you? Daniel, you told me to stay home. So I did. I chose to spend Christmas where I was wanted, where I was appreciated." My voice was steady, unwavering. "And as for making you look bad, that's a consequence of your own actions, not mine." He stammered, clearly taken aback by my newfound assertiveness. "Mom, we need to talk. Seriously, when are you coming home?" "I'll be back after the new year. And yes, Daniel, we do need to talk. About a lot of things." I hung up, my hands trembling slightly, but not with fear, with adrenaline, with power. Eleanor called moments later, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Martha, that photo. You look absolutely radiant. And who is that handsome man?" "The internet is buzzing." Clara posted a frantic message on her page, asking if anyone knew where you were. The internet was buzzing? Clara was frantic? A strange sense of vindication settled over me. It wasn't just about my happiness, it was about their discomfort. It was about them realizing I could exist, and even thrive, without their permission. That was the real sting. Then my phone rang again. An unknown number. "Hello, Mrs. Davies," a formal, professional voice. "This is Mr. Davies, your attorney. I apologize for calling on Christmas, but your son, Daniel, was in my office yesterday." The world tilted. My son, my attorney. What did he want? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He was inquiring about your will, Mrs. Davies, and the deed to your house." A cold, sickening dread washed over me. Daniel, my son, asking about my will. It wasn't just about the house being a refuge, it was about ownership. Clara wasn't just slowly erasing me, she was planning to take everything. And Daniel, my son, was helping her. I couldn't enjoy the rest of my time in Savannah. The beautiful city, the warm conversations with David, all faded into the background as a single, terrifying thought consumed me. I needed proof. I needed to understand the full extent of their betrayal, and I had 3 days until my flight home to formulate a plan. This wasn't just a battle for my dignity anymore. This was a war for my life, for my future, and I was now playing to win. December 26th, 8:43 a.m. I hadn't slept. Mr. Davies's words echoed in my head. Your son was inquiring about your will. I rose before dawn, made coffee in my hotel room, and sat by the window, an old notebook open on my lap. The city outside was just beginning to stir, a faint hum rising from the streets below. I began to write, meticulously documenting every incident, every slight, every theft. February 2021. Daniel and Clara move in, temporarily. April 2021. Clara sells the grandfather clock without permission. June 2021. My antique book collection reorganized into boxes in the attic. August 2021. First time Clara borrows my credit card for necessities, a designer handbag. December 2023. Daniel asks about my will. The list grew. A chilling chronicle of 3 years of escalating disrespect and calculated manipulation. At the end, I wrote, "They are waiting for me to die." The words felt stark and brutal on the page, but undeniably true. A knot of fear and anger tightened in my stomach. My phone vibrated. Daniel again. This time, I answered on the third ring. "Hello, Mom." His voice was different. Not angry, not demanding. It was laced with a strange mix of fear and desperation. "We need to talk, please. Not over the phone. When you get back." "I'm listening," I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil within me. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. A long, heavy silence. I could almost hear him breathing, struggling to find the right words. "Clara, she's really upset. She says we can't trust you anymore, that the photo was an act of rebellion to humiliate us." "Humiliate you? I merely spent Christmas with a friend, Daniel. I thought you wanted me to stay home." The sarcasm was unintentional, but it hung in the air between us. "I know, I told her that. But she says you're changing, that you're becoming selfish." Selfish. For having my own life, for smiling in a picture, for daring to exist without their permission. The word stung, but I refused to let it penetrate. "And what do you think, Daniel?" I asked, my voice steady. Another silence, longer this time. I imagined him pacing, running a hand through his hair, caught between two opposing forces. "I don't know what to think, Mom. I'm confused. Clara says one thing, you say another. And you what?" I prompted, my heart aching for the boy I had raised, the son who seemed so lost, so utterly devoid of his own convictions. "I just want us to be a family again." Those words, so desperate, so childlike, pierced me. They were the words of the Daniel I remembered, the one before Clara, before the weight of his failures and her influence had crushed his spirit. But I also knew that Daniel might not exist anymore. "Son," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Why did you go to my lawyer?" The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched, taut and uncomfortable, filled with the unspoken truth. How did you know that?" he finally stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "He called me Daniel. He's my lawyer. It's his job to tell me when someone asks about my documents." My tone was flat, devoid of emotion, a deliberate choice to keep him from deflecting. "Mom, It was Clara's idea, the familiar refrain, the instant shifting of blame. "I don't care whose idea it was. I asked you why." He stammered, his voice choked. She said we should be prepared, in case something happens to you, to know how things stand." "In case something happens to me? Daniel, I'm 68, not 90. I'm perfectly healthy." A bitter laugh escaped me. What exactly did she mean by, "in case something happens to you"? "No, Mom, it wasn't like that. She just meant, for the future. For planning." His voice was rising again, a desperate plea for me to believe him. But what?" I pressed, my voice hardening, cutting through his excuses. "Are you two waiting for me to die so you can get my house?" "No, Mom, that's not it." His voice cracked, and I heard the faint sound of stifled sobs, like when he was 7, and fell off his bike, scraped his knee, and ran to me for comfort. "I didn't want to. I didn't. Clara said it was just to be informed, that you hadn't told us anything about your will, and it was important to know." My son, my boy, so manipulated that he no longer knew where his voice ended and hers began. The image of him as a small child, looking up at me with trusting eyes, flashed in my mind, making the current reality even more painful. "Daniel, listen to me very carefully. My will is my decision. My house is my asset, and when I die, which I hope is many, many years from now, My assets will be distributed according to my wishes, not Clara's, and not yours if you continue to enable her. You are my son, and I love you, but I will not be taken advantage of." I heard him take a shaky breath. "Mom, please, just come home. We can talk. We can fix this." "I will come home, Daniel, but things will be different. Very different." I hung up, my heart heavy with a mixture of sadness and resolve. The conversation had confirmed my worst fears, but it had also given me clarity. I knew what I had to do. The next 3 days in Savannah were spent not in leisurely exploration, but in quiet contemplation, solidifying my resolve. I walked the squares, but my mind was miles away, preparing for the confrontation that awaited me. Back home, 2 days later, the house felt strangely quiet. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable emptiness. Clara was nowhere to be seen. Daniel met me at the door, his eyes red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped, looking like a child who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Mom," he began, his voice barely a whisper, a shadow of its usual strength. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what, Daniel?" I asked, my voice calm, but firm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. "For allowing your wife to dismantle my life piece by piece. For standing by while she sold my heirlooms. For going behind my back to inquire about my will." Each question was a hammer blow, designed to break through his denial. He flinched, recoiling as if physically struck. I didn't know what to do. She's so persuasive, and I was so worried about our finances, about losing everything. He wrung his hands, unable to meet my gaze. "Worry is not an excuse for betrayal, Daniel, and it certainly doesn't give you the right to plot against your own mother." I walked past him, into the living room, a space that felt both familiar and alien. The minimalist console table still stood where the grandfather clock once was, a stark reminder of what had been lost. The new, stark blinds covered the windows where my grandmother's curtains had hung, blocking out the familiar light. The room felt cold, impersonal, stripped of its soul. "Where is Clara?" I asked, turning to face him, my gaze unwavering. She went to her mother's. She said she needed space after the photo." He looked down at his hands, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "She's really angry, Mom. She said if you don't apologize, she's not coming back." A bitter laugh escaped me, a sound devoid of humor. "Apologize? For what? For daring to be happy? For not letting her walk all over me anymore?" I shook my head, the weariness of years settling on me, but also a fierce determination. "Daniel, I'm not apologizing. Not to her, and not to you for standing up for myself. But what about us? What about our family?" His voice was desperate, a plea for the past that no longer existed. "Our family, Daniel, is broken, and it's not because I went to Savannah. It's because you allowed Clara to drive a wedge between us. It's because you chose her over me, over your own conscience, over your own home." I paused, letting my words sink in, watching the realization dawn in his eyes. "I want Clara out of this house, permanently." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock, his face paling even further. "Mom, you can't. Where will we go? We have nowhere else." The panic in his voice was raw, unadulterated. "That's not my problem, Daniel. This is my house, and I will not live under the same roof as someone who has actively tried to erase me from my own life, and who has plotted to take my property. You have a choice, son. Either Clara leaves, or you both do." He stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and fear. It was the first time I had ever truly stood my ground against him, against them. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and years of resentment, punctuated only by the frantic beating of my own heart. Finally, he whispered, his voice barely audible, You really mean it, don't you?" Every word. My voice was a steel blade, sharp and unyielding. The next few weeks were a blur of tension and painful conversations. Clara, when she finally returned, was furious. Her eyes blazed with a cold fury I had never seen directed so openly at me. She raged, she cried, she accused me of being selfish and cruel, of tearing her family apart. She threw accusations about my supposed abandonment, about my affair in Savannah, twisting every truth into a weapon. But I held firm, my resolve unshakable. Daniel, caught in the middle, was a wreck. He tried to mediate, to find a compromise, his voice cracking with stress, but I refused to budge. This was my line in the sand, etched deep and clear. Eventually, Clara packed her bags. The sound of her suitcases being dragged down the stairs, the final slam of the front door, echoed through the house like a liberation. She left with a final, venomous glare, promising to make my life a living hell. Daniel, heartbroken and conflicted, stayed, but our relationship was irrevocably damaged. It took months of difficult conversations, of him finally acknowledging his complicity, of him seeking therapy to understand his own patterns of avoidance and people-pleasing, before we could even begin to heal. The silence in the house, once suffocating, slowly began to feel like a balm. During that time, I met with Mr. Davies, my attorney. I updated my will, ensuring that my assets would be protected, and clearly outlining my wishes. I also put legal measures in place to prevent anyone from selling my property without my explicit consent, a protective shield against future betrayals. It was a painful, but necessary step, a declaration of my sovereignty over my own life and property. One afternoon, a few months later, I received a call from a local hospital. Clara had been in a minor car accident. She was fine, but shaken, and I was listed as her emergency contact. A strange twist of fate, a lingering thread from a life I was actively untangling myself from. Against my better judgment, a flicker of my old self, the one who always put others first, compelled me to go. I found her in a small, sterile room, her arm in a sling, her face pale and drawn, the usual bravado stripped away by vulnerability. When she saw me, her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite decipher. "Martha, what are you doing here?" "They called me. I'm your emergency contact." My voice was softer than I intended, a reflection of the unexpected empathy I felt. We looked at each other, two women who had been adversaries, who had caused each other so much pain, now stripped bare by circumstance. The air was thick with unspoken history. "How are you?" I asked, the question genuine. "Fine. Nothing serious. Just a broken bone and a more broken ego." She gave a humorless laugh, a raw, honest sound. "You don't have to stay. I already called a friend." "Are you sure?" I asked, a small offering of continued presence. "Yes." Her gaze dropped to her bandaged arm. I turned to leave, but she called my name. "Martha?" I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. "Yes?" I'm sorry. For everything. For how I treated you. For what I did." Her voice cracked. And for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. A glimmer of the person she might have been, or could still become. "You were right about everything. I just wanted security, and I became a horrible person looking for it." I didn't answer right away. I let her words hang in the air, absorbing them, testing their weight. "We all make mistakes, Clara. The difference is whether we learn from them. Do you?" She nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I learned not to be silent. I learned that self-love isn't selfishness. I learned that it's okay to set boundaries. Daniel is better off being himself, with or without you. That's the difference." I said, a quiet truth. Do you think he'll ever be able to forgive me?" Her voice was small, fragile. "I don't know. But you should start by forgiving yourself, and then work on being someone who deserves forgiveness." I offered no false promises, only a path forward. Her friend arrived a few minutes later, a kind-faced woman who offered me a grateful nod. I said goodbye to Clara, a final, quiet farewell to a chapter of my life. As I walked out of the hospital, into the crisp afternoon air, I felt something strange. It wasn't joy at her pain. It was peace. Peace from knowing I had chosen to be a better person than the pain that had been inflicted on me. Peace from having closed a difficult chapter with honesty and a glimmer of hope for her, and for myself. December came again, 1 year since that Christmas that changed everything. This time my house was full, not with the suffocating silence of resentment, but with the vibrant hum of life and genuine affection. Daniel and his new girlfriend Sarah, a kind, intelligent woman who looked at him with genuine respect and a quiet understanding. Eleanor, who had flown in from across the country, her laughter bright and infectious. David, who had become a dear friend, and who now lived just a few towns away, his presence a comforting anchor. A few neighbors, old friends who had always supported me, their faces etched with warmth. And me, in my house, my space, my reclaimed home, feeling more present and alive than I had in years. I cooked a feast. The kitchen, once a battleground, now filled with the comforting aromas of turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, and hot cider with a kick. We laughed, the sound echoing joyfully through the rooms. We sang carols, some off-key, some with heartfelt enthusiasm. We exchanged small but meaningful gifts, each one chosen with care and love. And when we raised our glasses to toast, I looked around the table, my heart swelling with gratitude. These were the people I chose to have in my life, and the ones who chose me, not for what I could give them, but for who I was. "A toast?" David proposed, his eyes twinkling, catching mine across the table. "Yes," everyone replied, their voices eager. I stood, glass in hand, the warmth of the crystal a pleasant weight. "I want to toast to second chances," I began, my voice clear and strong, "to learning to say no, to finding your voice after years of silence, to sons who learn to grow, to friends who hold your hand, and to loves that arrive when you least expect them." Everyone raised their glasses, their smiles reflecting the candlelight. "And to remembering," I continued, my voice imbued with the wisdom of experience, "that it is never, ever too late to choose yourself." Cheers! The glasses clinked, a harmonious chime. The music played softly in the background, laughter filled my house, and the scent of pine and cinnamon hung in the air. And there, surrounded by light and love and reclaimed dignity, I understood something profound. The real treasure was never the house, it was getting my soul back. That night, after everyone had gone, and the last dishes were put away, I sat on my bed, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I took out a photo from my bedside drawer, the photo from that Christmas in Savannah, David and me smiling, the Spanish moss swaying gently in the background. The photo that changed everything. And I smiled, a deep, genuine smile, because that woman in the picture, that woman who dared to buy a plane ticket, who dared to set boundaries, who dared to take her life back, that woman was me, and I was never going to forget her again. If you're listening to this story and you feel invisible in your own home, let me tell you something I learned along the way. You matter. Your dignity is non-negotiable. Your voice deserves to be heard. And it is never, listen to me, it is never too late to take your life back. I was 68 years old when I decided enough was enough. How old are you? It doesn't matter. What matters is this. Today can be your day one, the day you buy the ticket, the day you set the boundary, the day you say no more. Because true wealth isn't what you own, it's what you refuse to let anyone take from you. Your peace, your dignity, your right to be happy. Don't give it away. Not ever again. If this story touched your heart, I want to know where you're listening from. Write your city or country in the comments. I would love to know that these stories are reaching every corner of the world, where there are women and men who need to remember their worth. Give it a like if this story made you feel something. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to keep hearing stories of people who refuse to stay silent, because we all deserve a second chance, and we all deserve to be happy. Until the next story, take good care, and remember, your voice matters. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.